Heard us. Hello, hello. All
All
right.
right, they are coming in. We are live. Um, we've got lots of folks coming in. We're going to get started in just a minute. I'll do a little introduction, but for now, the room is filling up fast and furiously. We already have 25 viewers, and it's climbing every second. So we're excited about that. Today has been chock full of online stuff. One of our students just did a webinar on memory and comics for the believer. Justin, you had a Comic-Con at Home panel earlier today. Is that right? And the Eisners are on later tonight.
Yeah, it's chock full. Yeah, the panel that I did was on Howard Cruz, a sort of homage to the late great Howard Cruz, who was dearly missed for sure. It was pretty wonderful to put that together. Something for someone who was not only such an incredible cartoonist, but also such a major figure in terms of community and opening doors for people. And so. But yeah, you're right. We're right in the middle of Comic-Con. So Gilbert, you would normally be like roaming the halls of Comic-Con right now.
Oh yeah, it's Friday. Yeah, I'd be wasted already. Exhausted already. After
all right. With that,
get through it sometimes. I hear you.
With that, we're going to welcome our audience now as they walk in the virtual door. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Sility. I have the great privilege of chairing the MFA in Comics program at California College of the Arts. We're part of the Humanities and Sciences Division under the great leadership of our dean, Tina Takamoto. And we're thrilled that everybody's here tonight and more people are coming in. I can see the number rising. So this is part of our annual Comics in the City lecture series. This is a public lecture series where we throw the doors open to everyone. We usually put our students in the front row, and we're putting our students in the virtual front row today. This is part of our summer session where our students are making their kind of comics dreams come true. They're working on these amazing thesis projects and taking classes, everything from tools and techniques to comics seminars where we study comics, to workshops where we try to make our stories as great as we can possibly imagine. So tonight, I'm going to turn things over to one of our professors, Justin Hall. He's an amazing cartoonist, a comic scholar, an incredible professor for us, and he's going to do the formal introductions. But while the conversation is happening tonight, I'm going to be monitoring the questions. There's a little button at the bottom of your screen on your Zoom where you can submit a question for the Q&A. So we'll have some time at the end. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions. We probably won't be able to get to everyone's, but we'll do our best. I'll be sending those to Justin throughout the talk. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Justin. Justin, Gilbert, have a great time. I'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Matt. Fabulous. So Gilbert, thank you so much for being part of this. This is absolutely such a dream of mine. Like, you're a real hero of mine, and have been for a long time. So and I've been trying to get you to come in person to CCA to do one of these things, but it's always during Comic-Con time. So this is, I mean, the silver lining for this strange time of ours, that I actually get to have you at least virtually. So normally you would be wandering the halls of Comic-Con at this point.
I'm looking for a place to sit.
That's always a problem. That is a problem. Do you miss that at all? Do you miss the experience of like?
It's nice to have a forced break. This is a break, and it's nice to have it because we can't help it. I'd feel really weird if I just stayed home and I'd be flipping channels, going, I could be at the con right now. That kind of silly thing. Even though I'd be exhausted and wanting to get out of there, but no. But no, really, seriously, I kind of like the break.
Yeah. Do you do other conventions as well, or do you tour?
Not lately. Just, I don't know. Somehow I just have it lately, and now with the way things are, it's going to be a while till we get back to them.
Yeah. So how does that? Has the pandemic kind of affected your workflow at all? I mean, you're incredibly prolific. I would say one of the most prolific cartoonists alive right now. So I mean, you're reaching kind of Jack Kirby levels of your like production output. Osamu Tezuka, like.
Oh boy.
The drawing with both hands.
Tezuka had assistants, and Jack Kirby didn't ink or letter his work. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
No. I love both of them.
Have you ever used assistants?
No. It's just me in my room and scratching my head and doing it. No, I can't. it's too late to adjust, maybe when, I'm crippling arthritis might force that, but as right now, it's just me,
Yeah. So has your workflow changed at all with the pandemic times, or are you still, I mean, in some ways cartoonists were always kind of well positioned for this moment, right? Because we're used to chaining ourselves to a table for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, I'm used to it. In the last several years, almost maybe 10 years or so, I've just been working all the time, just 5 days a week and a little bit on weekends. So that got normal. I do get, stir crazy a little bit, a little cabin fever, and there's no place to go but the supermarket, that kind of thing. So it is a bit. So I walk up and down the stairs and, walk to the mailbox and that sort of thing. But I just got back from Ventura, California, where my wife's taking care of her mom. Mm-hmm. And so, we visited, and now we're back to do this and a few other things. And we try to go back and forth as much as we can, but it's not easy, it's a long drive.
So what does your kind of normal workday look like? I mean, and I wanted to ask also just kind of about your process, your craft and process. So, I mean, you've got these incredibly elaborate scripts, stories. So do you script things first? Do you jump into thumbnails? What's your work process look like?
Well, in the old days, it was thumbnails. I would work on thumbnails and work on dialogue, within the thumbnails, throw those out, do this, and you could do a lot of editing, just scratch out a box, and it was pretty sloppy, but worked for me. Now I just go straight to the page, because usually I'm in the middle of a story, because the characters write themselves, so I already know what the characters want to do. They let me know what they want to do, so I usually just go straight to the page, and it's all pencil, just rule borders, really boring stuff, and then I start to draw, and it's literally sometimes like, what should she be wearing today? Literally the story, or at least the weather in the story, will count on how I feel like drawing the characters. If I'm in a crunch, I always put them in the snow.
That's a good tip.
But no, but seriously, I just my process is just so organic now over the years that I'm writing, drawing, penciling, borders, coming up with, I need an extra panel, so I'm gonna have to cut this one in two. It's very primitive still, and it works for me that way.
So you don't have, I mean, because some of your stories are incredibly intricate. So I just assume that you would have like a really well-developed outline and script that you would do kind of before launching into the thumbnails, but you're saying you kind of more organically just have that happen?
Yeah, I'm letting that it happen now. This is more than I did before, because in the early days, I would have a little bit more of control of what big story I was doing, but that got out of control. Like when I was doing Poison River and Love and Rockets, that got so out of control that I couldn't even have splash pages. I couldn't even have introductions, because it was just so dense. And I go, I need this page. I need this. I only have 16. So that was it then. It was overwhelming, but I just have a mind that can collect it. That's all. It doesn't always work. You forget things. You forget which character did what. What does this guy look like? You got to research your own comics to see what a character looks like. But now, I just let it happen. I don't really super edit anymore, unless it gets too indulgent, But I already know that I'm not going there. I'm not going to let this get indulgent unless I really, really need a page, a transition page. This is what's happening here, but it's too soon to get to the next scene. So I'll put a page in the middle.
So I know that with something like Poison River, you add a bunch of content to the story when it was collected, right? So you were able to almost kind of edit the thing by going back with the collected version, add material. So how does that work for you?
Well, in the early days, it was difficult. We would actually cut out pages, cut the pages up and replace them with tape on the back or glue or whatever. And that was the way I did it. Then I started to, get used to doing it right, meaning, less work for myself, but so I can produce, worthy work, better work. What was the question again?
So when you were doing those collected versions and adding material and you're editing, so what does that process look like? I mean, literally cutting and pasting, and you have a lot of especially in something like Poison River, it's mostly grid format panels, right?
Yeah, what I do now is, or even then, I just add an entire page. And I used to just add a panel or half a page or just a tier.
Mhm.
I found that to be just too difficult. And so anyway, I literally add a page. I go, well, if you add a page, you're screwing up what the other pages look like. You
Right.
want the certain pages to face each other. So you add two pages.
Mhm.
That's what I do now. But I'm always concerned with, like, just fill in, don't add stuff, don't make the story more complicated.
Mhm.
Simply to put in information you didn't put in the story. Just find information you didn't put in there and smooth it out. Like make it pages of dialogue instead of two panels.
A lot of that is about decompression as well. Like kind of.
Right, and that helps, because usually something like Poison River was very dense, panel to
Mhm.
panel, just dense. So I thought at that time, I thought, well, why don't I just spread it out? Besides cutting it up, add pages that just kind of, like you said, decompress. And then
Mhm.
you go back to the intense stuff. But the thing is, you got to just keep on it, because you don't want to screw up the rhythm.
Yeah.
You want to get, the proper rhythm. And um,
In Julio's day, like that I mean, when that's collected, you made this decision to make it 100 pages, right?
right.
Which represents 100 years. It's a century. A man who was born on the first day of the century and
Mhm.
dies at the last day of the century, and
Mhm.
it's 100 pages. Did you know that? Did you have to kind of fiddle with? But it was initially serialized from Love Rocket, so you had to kind of collect that together. Did you have to fiddle with the pages to make that work?
Yes, and that one was a little more structured. That one had a little bit more foresight. I kind of made notes, and because I had to say, okay, what year is this? And that was difficult for me, because I'm terrible at researching, and to let you know what year it is. I had to have the proper clothing, this kind of thing. And yet, even though there was no speaking of what year that was, that I after doing that and a couple other stories, I go, I'm just going to go back to the old style. It just says, meanwhile, in 1949. I really do that now, only because I get lost. So I can imagine the reader can get lost, but Julio's day worked that way by just thinking, okay, it's just moving forward. And then you get the problem of characters looking alike.
Yes.
That's tough with that, because I'm only going to have these characters once. Whereas in Palomar, I can change the way they look. I go, this character looks too much like this one. I'm going to change her hairdo or change, whatever she's doing. But this, I had to think, like, there's three women that look exactly the same. They have their hair in a bun, and they have these old farmer dresses. And I just had to kind of tinkle. And that's another thing that's kind of annoying. You have to say their names all the time. Well, Maria, what are you doing, Maria? Maria, are you, did you say Maria 16 times on this page?
Yeah, yeah. You're also moving them through time. I mean, you're aging your characters. So a lot of your characters, and I mean, really most of your storylines, you see characters from when they're an infant to all the way to when they're old folks. So, and you still have to make them recognizable. And I mean, I'm constantly blown away by how clear that is. Like your character designs are really, it seems to me, very thoughtful. Maybe that's smoke and mirrors, but but you're able to figure out a character design that you can then age throughout an entire lifetime.
Yeah, sometimes that could, it's not that hard, but at the same time, other characters come around that look similar. See, you always have to consider
Mhm.
their individual looks. And I have a lot of characters, so sometimes you just have to abandon old characters so the new character can have a similar look, just because it works that way. For whatever reason.
So,
Um,
so speaking of all these characters, like you mentioned before about how the characters were kind of increasingly determining the story, and it's something I think about. Like I ran a Dungeons and Dragons campaign for like 6 years when I was in high school, and I remember like a character that I was playing for a long time, and then she eventually became she became her own personality in my head, and I couldn't make her do something that she didn't want to do. It got very kind of weird. And you've been working with these characters for almost 40 years now.
mhm.
So do the characters take over? I mean, do they tell you what to do? I mean, is there schizophrenia
The
things
ones
going
that
on?
have definition, mostly, like a character like Luba.
Yeah.
Luba was Luba from the beginning until now. And so I didn't have to worry about her, because she couldn't do anything weird. She couldn't fly a plane. She couldn't, she's just not. She's Luba. You keep teaching something to her that she doesn't understand. She just gives you a stare. Like, what are you talking about? That's her character. Some of them are a little more open. Like, I'm doing the stories about people in Fritz who are millionaires, and nothing stops them from what they want to do. And that includes their looks, their clothes, the areas they go, travel around the world. And sometimes that could get too easy. It get too like, okay, where are they now? Where are they, uh-oh, I don't want to research this country. I don't want to draw that, their buildings. No, just simply, it's, they write themselves in that way. And I used to fight them a lot because they just did not want to go here. I go, but you have to go this way to the story. Like when I've killed off characters, they insisted they didn't want to die. And I go, well, you have to. I mean, it's the story. It's terrible, but it's the story. It could only work this way. So, I mean, look, this is all in my head, people. I'm not talking to paper drawings, I mean, drawing, or am I,
Right. So the one thing I do think about how, as a good storyteller, you have to be a bit of a sadist, right? Like you create these characters that are wonderful and you love them, right? You have to love them or else they don't sing on the page. But then you have to do terrible things to them, like awful, awful things to them, including kill them at times. Yeah. So there's a certain kind of like love affair that you have with your characters and also a kind of sadistic, I mean, how do you reconcile that? Because there are characters who don't, creators who don't do terrible things, enough terrible things to their creations, I think, and you are good at that.
Well, I learned a long time ago, especially when I really torment a character that went through a lot of hell, but they lived, say. I go, well, people go through that in real life, and we still respect them as people. Like they went through a lot. Like you could be at a party, you're talking to somebody, and you think they had a pretty, banal life, and then you go, oh, well, and this and that, and this happened to me, and I was there, and they came in the house, and they burglarized, and they tied us up, and or some horrible, horrible thing that happened to them. But you have to look at them as people, like, oh, dude, that sucked, that kind of thing. So I do that with the characters. I will put them through horrible things, and if they survive as we do in real life. You go on and have a life, And because sometimes I'll have readers read stuff about a character that they thought was, okay, and had a regular life. Then they'll go back to an old reprint and go, whoa, that happened to them, So that's actually flattering when they get shocked at how I treated a character.
It does feel like there are consequences to action. I mean, to events, right? In your work, where like I think a character like Kamo, right, who starts off as this kind of like pretty boy, sort of Lothario, and then he and then he becomes, and he's always silent, and then he gets burned, and then he becomes this sort of faithful lover of Luba, and he's still silent in the sense that he can't verbalize words properly. So like, but it seems a fairly believable kind of response to trauma. And you've got a lot of characters that kind of respond to trauma, even in, generational trauma, right? Where you have like a character like Marisela, who is, abused by Luba when she's a kid. And then you see that she gets away from Luba, but she's also kind of perpetuating some of that trauma in some way. So do you think about like how these kind of effects go to, play out through generations?
I just feel it's more of a feeling. It's more like, well, this is probably where I want this to go, because I don't want these characters who suffered this trauma to just be that character. I do want to give them more. What I have to do is restrain myself. Like, let's say a character like Marisela, who, went through, she became a very interesting character. I hate to say it, when she was abused, and then she ran away and she came to America and people helped her illegal. I never did that story. Where she basically got the Palomar characters in America illegally, but she was so rich, she just did it because she could. That's weird, because like then I'm ready to do her story. It's the Marisela comic now. I want to do her story. I go, oh, but I got to do all this other stuff. So you have to pick and choose. You have to pick your battles. You have to pick your, which character's gonna be worth traveling with, for a long period.
So, I mean, at times, you have this like huge, long kind of storytelling, with these characters from Palomar, but you've also, I think increasingly, then like take a break from that and do a standalone graphic novel, a miniseries, oftentimes with Dark Horse, it seems. And does that, and oftentimes using really radically different genres. You've done everything from like zombies to erotica to kids comics, superheroes even. So talk to me about that. Like when you take a break from Love and Rockets and you do something that's radically different, like what is that? Is that necessary for your soul, or like how does that work?
It's just I'm just showing off, you know, like, okay, now I'm gonna do a superhero my style. I'm gonna do zombies my way. No, it's just, yeah, it is that, but then I always remember I got to do it my way because it's pointless for me to do a zombie story like the way they do in other comics or on TV or whatever. But that doesn't always work when you're at another company because they work differently. Fantagraphics is really easy because I've known Gary forever and Eric, and it's basically, oh, do what you want to, you know, just do it your way, you know, and if they don't like what I'm doing or suspect that it might not be good, they'll let me know, but that hasn't happened very often. But like working with Dark Horse, I'm working closer with an editor. DC, you're really working with an editor, and Marvel, you're really working with an editor who doesn't even know who you are. But the other thing is, yeah, it's different. It's different. I did it before just to, I don't know, just to do it, really, just to like, okay, I'm going to make this comic here. And because I know everything's going to be collected. That's why everything's done in a miniseries, you know, so just to have different books and different things. But I'm kind of burned out on that now. I can pretty much go back to just doing it my way and with Love and Rockets. And then the extra books I'm doing at Fantagraphics.
Right. You know. Right. One of the things that I just in terms of the kind of how you approach cartooning, you're doing a lot of stuff with, I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff with genre in general. So, you know, as you said, kind of doing everything from zombies to slice of life. Or you're really known, I think, oftentimes associated with magical realism because of the Love and Rocket stories. And oftentimes you're doing specific kind of mashups of genre or kind of commentary on it, almost like when you're doing the B-movie stuff, but it's also part within the Love and Rockets world, but the B-movie, you're doing the B-movie. So how do you think about genre? I mean, is it just feel like a sandbox to play in, or are you trying to make a comment upon genre? How does it work?
Well, you can almost say that Palomar was an aberration, that I come from genre. I come from monster movies and comic books and superheroes and everything that isn't grown up, isn't a real novel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because but what I respected about the comic strips of the ye olde days, you know, the newspaper strips, like most notably Gasoline Alley. Mm-hmm. It was a soap opera type strip, or whatever you want to call it, and it was just about a man that worked, you know, lived near a garage where he repaired cars. He gets a baby's left on his doorstep, and he raises this. This is a foundling, and the rest is history. You know, the kid grows over the years as like a normal person. They got stuck with the characters are now too old because the strip is going on. You know, I guess the main character Wally Wallet was like 200 years old by the time you let him out of the strip. But it just was. I was looking at an old history of comics, and I never saw Gasoline Alley. I heard about it, and I saw little snippets of it, and I thought it was really well done, really well drawn, especially those Sundays. But it was just a little strip, and it had the man talking, and he goes, "I'm 40 years old. I haven't done anything with my life," and blah 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 blah. And the girl sitting with him, he goes, "Oh, Skizik, you're okay." And I went, "Boing! That's the foundling baby. That 40-year-old guy is the foundling baby." But they didn't cheat. They didn't jump and make him 40, you know, the next month. It was like over years, and that really impressed me. Like, you can do something serious with that, or something with that. You know, that impressed me. You know, I didn't know what I was going to do because I was still reading Spider-Man and stuff. But I always kept that in mind, and that would be cool to do a strip where everybody gets older, and so you have a whole world. You know, and I just had this weird respect for comic strips that lasted forever, or to me, because I was a kid, like something like Prince Valiant, you know, which is pretty much forgotten now. It was just the most incredibly drawn comic strip because the artist, Al Foster, wanted it to be that. He wanted to be the greatest looking comic you could, you know, Sunday page you could look at, you know. And I have the book that reprints the pages as they originally drawn, the size, and they're phenomenal. They're just phenomenal. It's gorgeous. Yeah. So,
and anyway, how tragic that is that we can't really have those kind of comic strips anymore because we don't have none of the comic strip artists have that page size to work with anymore.
Yeah, we just have to accept that it's different now. Just accept that we do things differently, whether it's electronically or even just on the page. It's just different. We just have to enjoy what came before if it was good, you know. Like Peanuts is old now. That used to be in our lives, everyday lives. You remember that? Peanuts was in our everyday lives. And then in 1999, it was over. you know? And then I was like, no peanuts? What are you talking about? Then they would reprint it, you know, in the papers because, you know, for young people, you know. And I just thought, this is old. I can't, you know, this is old. I mean, I have the collections. I've seen these, you know. So anyway, but now I'm over it. I mean, that was a long time ago, you know. So it was a little hard to see peanuts go, you know.
You've had I mean, you also dealt with different page sizes, right? So Love and Rocket started out as a magazine-sized comic, and then the first volume ended, and then now you're working along with Jaime in this kind of more something closer to an standard American comic book size. So how has that affected your sense of storytelling?
You just are careful to remember what it's going to look like when it's printed. That's the only thing, you know, like, well, this is going to be smaller, so maybe you don't want to make that too much detail in that little panel or something, you know. You just adjust, you know. I just draw smaller now naturally, just because it works for me. I've never thought about the art being in galleries, you know. They end up in galleries, but the work, that's usually my old work from the magazine size, the old first run. But now I draw pretty small, pretty close to the art, just because I prefer it these days.
So in terms of your storytelling is it seems to me very much character driven, and we talked about how you've kind of like come up with these characters and then done horrible things to them. I'm wondering also, like, you have this incredible diversity of cast, right? And that's always been a hallmark, I think, of Love and Rockets in general, and your work. How do you think about diversity issues within representation and diversity in comics? And what do you feel like your place is in that?
Well, it was since I was a kid. I mean, I liked the world they were giving us in comics, the comics I liked, and this and that. But I would always perk up if there was like a scene with black characters that didn't have anything to do with, you know, crime or whatever. You know, it was just them talking. Maybe it was just 2 panels, and that was like, what if there was a whole comic about that? You know, think about that. And same with Asian characters or, you know, Latino characters. You know, because I was well aware that, especially in Latino characters, they have tons of comics in Latino in Mexico, say. You know, they have tons, but they just don't translate here. It's a whole different thing. So I just, you know, I'd look at those and I would be, you know, just thinking that, what if there was comics about them? And I would walk outside the house and it was different from the world of comics, even though I love the world of comics. And then I go to school and I go, well, there's like, you know, 10 black kids in my class, you know, 7 Asians, you know, and the rest are Latino, maybe 3 white folk, you know, in a particular class. That was my life. That was, you know, it was mixed. And then you go out in the playground and everybody's playing and this and that. It's creepy and it's sad, but it's when the kids start to get older and they start to separate. Yeah. It's like, you don't hang out with those people. You don't hang, because when you're little, it's first grade, kindergarten, everybody's together. Mm-hmm. And then as you get older, and we probably learn this from adults, that you're supposed to hate them.
Yeah, right.
You know, and it just becomes that, you know, I don't know.
It is like, I mean, I think about the Love and Rockets X storyline, which is so like this, it's really very much about kind of interactions within the States of different races and ethnicities, and also sexualities and genders. And like, I mean, it's a huge range of characters, and their interactions are, I mean, I think, you know, some creators want to create a sense of diversity that's more kind of utopic, and you're not doing that. Like, and you're not ever letting people kind of off the hook. Where, you know, there's, for example, you know, this older black woman gets attacked by white Nazis, and so we're sympathetic to her. And then, but towards the end, there's this one panel where she turns around to this Korean amputee guy, and it basically starts going off about him being slanty-eyed and all this. And so we're, you don't let anyone just kind of be heroic in a sort of.
Yeah. That was that particular story, though. I probably wouldn't do that all the time. That was just that story where everybody's all screwed up, sort of like, I don't know, and where it was not working, you know, for all the characters. And that's why I had put Maricela and some of the Palomar characters in there. So you'll sort of have a guide, like they're seeing this, like this is America. Because, you know, Maricela comes from a little village where everybody's the same color and everybody, you know, so she comes to, you know, Southern California, and it's like, yeah, everybody's different colors. Nobody likes each other. That was that story, though. I don't feel that all the time. Right. You know,
that's yeah. Sorry. But that's interesting that, like, because the the perspective of the reader here, you've made to be the characters from Palomar coming into the United States and kind of seeing the United States through the eyes of these characters, which is really fascinating, because so often it's the I think about something like Orange is the New Black, right, where the kind of character that kind of brings you into this world, primarily dominated by women of color and queer women and such, is this kind of middle-class white woman, basically. Mm-hmm. And because that's supposed to be the easy way for the reader to, the average reader or viewer to sympathize with this character and view this new world. You flip that, where we're coming in sympathizing with and looking through the eyes of the characters from this anonymous Central American village. So that's, fascinating, I think, for an American. I've always grown up in urban America. So to see urban America through the eyes of this other kind of character.
Mm-hmm. That was Love and Rockets. We knew that it wasn't on TV. We knew it wasn't going to be in movies. You're not going to convince anybody. It was just, this is Love and Rockets. We can do what we want. This is how we see. We felt sort of a responsibility to really, not necessarily a political one, but just more like, okay, this is what we saw. And we know people growing up that were cool and from different ethnic backgrounds, or even, as pure as the driven snow, I've known them all, and it's like, a lot of times it's great, sometimes it's not, but I wanted to emphasize that it's dumb, but it even though all the crazy sadistic stuff I was doing at the time, I go, essentially the characters I care about are the good ones, the ones who are good to each other, who just see, like, oh man, dude, they're messing with that guy over there. But yet, even if they don't relate to him from a cultural standpoint, I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta say, in terms of representation, like, I think it's incredibly important. And speaking as a gay guy, like, kind of seeing, you and Jaime were doing queer characters in really profoundly empathic and human sort of ways, creating these characters, way before most people were doing that. And it was incredibly profound for me to see this as kind of a young baby gay.
we don't, I've discussed this with my brother. We don't really know where that comes from. I just always thought, like, I've always just thought, like, we're all in this together, and that sort of thing, because I remember when we would listen to, when I started really getting to hard rock music, and I was growing up in my very early teens and stuff, it was during the glam period, the early 70s. So it was, Bowie, T-Rex, well, at first it started with Alice Cooper, but then it went over to T-Rex, Bowie, where it was more effeminate, more androgynous. And we couldn't get enough of that. We were like, okay, if they're not wearing giant platforms and eyeliner, I don't want to listen to them. That's why I never listened to 10cc, because I love them now, but I didn't listen to them because they didn't have costumes. I'm serious. That's how fascist I was. I want costumes. I want eyeliner. I want colored hair. For some reason, we just liked that. And the more, outrageous they acted, the better we liked it, And then that sort of died off. And so when punk came around, I accepted that as an adjustment. Like, well, now it's going to be different. Sort of wider, bigger. We didn't know how big punk was going to be and be a cultural, change.
Sure.
But, I thought this is a good way to go.
Yeah. No, it's really, I also really admired how you were able to create queer characters that were also villainous at times. And, like, we're not kind of perfect, because I think of a lot of, for example, Alison Bechdel's Likes to Watch Out For, which is also very much concerned with diversity and representation. But she had a hard time kind of making the characters too awful. Like, she wanted to kind of portray people in a good light, but there's something really wonderful about letting every kind of character be the entire range of kind of personality, right, from assholes to angels.
Well, that is actually work. I have to work on that. If I make a negative gay person or a black person, so I got to watch out. You better make it right. I don't want to just throw it in there. Oh, he's the bad guy. He robs houses, whatever. He's the gay guy. He rapes children. I didn't want to go anywhere near that, because what I did instead to make him look unpleasant or realistic was to make him unpleasant instead of like criminal. See, that's what's wrong with mainstream culture. They make it criminal. Gays are criminal. Blacks are criminal. No, they're people, and sometimes you get ones that are unpleasant to be around. And that goes for everybody, that goes for everybody. But you got to watch out for ethnics and gays and Asians, because there's already a prejudice like, oh, what's he going to do? What's she going to do? So I always make them self-indulgent, spoiled brats, bratty, while big mouths. That's the way I make them negative, just full of themselves or angry or mean, but just in speaking, not in their actions.
There's also, I think also because you have many different characters, right? So like if you only have one, Latinx character in a comic, and then whatever you do with that character ends up being feels like a sort of statement about that entire identity. But one of the great, I think, advantages is that you have many different you have many queer characters, you have many Black characters, you have many women, obviously, and so you can't just say Gilbert only does this sort of queer character. He's doing a huge range of them.
Oh, right now it's like I still keep my one eye open, while I do a character that people already have a prejudice toward. It really kills me to make sympathetic cops, let me tell you.
This day and age.
Yeah, right now it's tough.
Yeah. Did you know the work of Gus Arriola, Gordo?
Oh yeah, sure. Beautiful
art. Yeah. Such a beautiful comic. But I remember I was reading about his production, how he, as the kind of prominent Mexican-American cartoonist of his generation, that he started the character with a sort of kind of lazy campesino character with the sombrero kind of lying in the fields, and which was a kind of funny trope for him. But then he realized at some point that most Americans who aren't familiar with Latinx culture are going to just see this, right, and think that it represents everything. So the strip kind of evolved to become more politically conscious over time. So
that comes naturally. He was probably just doing that because it felt good, looked good, it was working, and then it's as it progresses, because it's in the paper all the time. You move with it, as the days progress.
Right. Another thing I wanted to talk about, you did this series called Birdland, which is an erotic comic series, and I make erotic comics myself. I'm a huge fan. I will say that I remember discovering that comic pretty early on, the first volume of it, and it just kind of blowing my mind, where it was a very utopic sort of depiction of sexuality. Everybody's having sex with everybody else in every permutation, including aliens, and there's just kind of wonderful tone to it, kind of freewheeling, expansive, utopic sort of vision of what sex and sexuality can be, which is this kind of communication between people. How do you view how comics can handle erotic content? Do you think it as a medium, it handles it in a different sort of way, or?
It might. I mean, because I know that handling sexuality, especially explicit, it's got to be in a magazine or in a black and white comic or whatever. I don't know. Whenever it encroaches into mainstream or color comics, it does feel uncomfortable. It doesn't seem like it belongs there. They're always complaining about somebody did a cover for a superhero comic and it was too erotic. And I agree with that. I go, that's not what this is for. This is a different audience, So that's why I lean toward the European magazines from the old days and undergrounds and this and that. And I think there's a place for it, but it shouldn't be spread everywhere. Just because that's a difficult subject. I mean, it's natural, blah blah blah. But people tend to move toward violence when they do stories about sex. And that's why I did Birdland the way I did. I wanted it to be as wild as a Jack Kirby comic, but there's no violence, physical violence going on. And I think I managed that. If you thumb through Birdland, it looks violent, but it's not. It's not at all.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. And whereas in Love and Rockets, there are quite violent sex scenes as well. Because it seems to me that it's quite unusual that for people to be able to use, creators to be able to use sex scenes as a way to put forward character and really make them about a character beat. So, do you think about a sex scene as something not just for titillation? A lot of the underground cartoonists really did it for shock value. Sure. And I think you were doing it for character usually.
Sometimes, and sometimes it was just because I got bored and I thought, let's just spice it up. Really, just a split moment, I've never shown this innocent character having sex with her husband. See, I made it clear that it was, good Christian sex. You know what I mean? I don't like to have too much, people being taken advantage of in sex scenes. If you'll notice that most of the time it's people or you know, consenting adults.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's, you know, the age differences are wonky, but that's what I just prefer to go that. It doesn't seem like, thinking about it, it seems like, oh no, he did this, did that. That's also part of a story. If sex goes bad, that's part of a story. And I'm not into that. I'm into the storytelling of it, but I'm not into like, well, this is the way I want sex to be depicted. You know?
But I feel like a lot of storytellers avoid the concept of sex altogether because they're worried about various different depictions or whatever. And whereas you do tackle this as saying this is part of human existence and part of life, and it determines character, how we have sex and what you know, fashion and with whom.
And that's why it's in Love and Rockets, which has always been considered an underground comic, even to this day. Apparently, when in some comic stores across the U.S., it's still in the back with the X-rated comics. This is Love and Rockets. It's been almost 40 years, and they still stick it in the back because they don't want something to scare them when they open up the book. You know. You know.
Yeah, amazing. All right, so I'm going to show some art here from. I've got a little. Oh, and I will say there's a protest going on right outside my door. So yeah, you're going to be hearing some political messaging, right? Yeah, it looks amazing actually.
More power to them.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let me come over and do this. Share screen. Okay. Okay, so
you had to go right for the boobs, right? You just had to go straight for the boobs, didn't you?
Well, you have there are boobs in a lot of your pages.
Yeah, I know.
We'll say that. And there's a friend worked at a strip joint, and the thing that he used to have to say to all customers was, "There's always time for tits." So yeah, there you go. So this is actually, I love this panel this page just because it's Venus describing how much she loves comics. So does she become a kind of like, you know, a way for you to kind of get that in there as a little meta commentary about the forum?
Yeah. Luckily, she was, you know, 11-year-old girl, and she could say whatever she wanted to, you know, because she's a decent person. She doesn't go mean, but she's just a firebrand. You know, she's just, you know, steam coming out of her head. She just thought she was funny. It used to bother my brother that she was always yelling at her mom, and like right here, she's yelling at her Aunt Fritz, you know. But to me, that was funny. It was just funny to me. But then I'll pull back, and then she says the last panel, which people really reprint that all the time. They really like it, you know, because that's just me. Yeah, that's me inside her head saying, you know, they're always talking about, well, the limits of comics. I go, the limits of imagination? Really? Is there such a thing, you know? So I don't know.
Yeah. I will say, like, your ability with, I mean, I'll actually flip a little bit. That you use comics as a medium in really specific ways that I think are quite unique, that, you know, especially in your more compressed stuff, you're flipping between scenes, usually oftentimes these scene to scene transitions using the kind of understanding comics, Scott McCloud sort of language, but you're oftentimes like, you know, like a snippet of a scene, and then the next panel is another scene, another scene, which, and it all stitches together. And it creates this sort of staccato rhythm, or was that, I mean, talk to me about that.
I used to think that was normal storytelling. When I used to do my comics, I used to think it was normal. Like, well, you just jump from this panel, you just jump from this scene, you just do it. And now I look back and I go, what a jumble. I didn't smooth this stuff out. I didn't make clear where the characters were and this and that. So I'm a little more conscious of that. But yeah, that's just the way I did, you know, that's the thing about not having an editor, you know, like really controlling the smoothness and the understanding of the story, you know, which is a good thing, actually. I've learned that working with DC and Dark Horse, is that, you know, when you work with an editor, they want you to slow down and get this thing out and it be understood. And I don't have that with Love and Rockets. So I might look back at something like this. This is okay, but there's some pages where I go, this is a mess. How did anybody ever like this page? You know, so I try to work on clarity now. That's my main focus these days.
But it's also amazing. Like, I feel like you created a comics vernacular that you know is, I mean, it's inspiring to me. Like, I think I take too long on my scenes. Like now I'm like, you know, everything is too slowed down, and, you know, Gilbert Hernandez can do like a scene in like a panel, boom, 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 boom. So
Well,
That's inspiring.
I appreciate when people like it because I look at it like cringe, you know. It's
You're one of the great masters. You're not allowed to cringe. Um, this is another panel, which I think is so beautiful, from Human Diastrophism, which was really your first kind of long form story, right? Is that?
this is actually no, this is
No, it's
a
actually
shorter story.
right. That's true. I think it was the one right after that, right?
Okay. Oh, yeah,
Uh,
the other one. Okay. Yeah, this is just something I wanted to play with learning, and this was just literally learning from Eisner and Kurtzman, the great storytellers of panel-to-panel art. John Stanley as well. Just that this happens, this happened, but you got to make it look cool. It was just I'll make it look, make a cool page for me, for my only entertainment, but didn't have it like we were talking before. I didn't have shock value.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause shock value can spoil things. I think that's why a lot of we were talking earlier about why a lot of artists don't use sex in their stories, and I don't think it's always a fear. I think it's just it gets in the way.
yeah.
You know, for the particular book they're doing or story they're doing. The sex does get in the way. Yeah, I still watch movies on, you know, and it's working out fine. And then there's a sex scene. I go, why did they have a sex scene? You know, and yet I'm the one who's all sticking in sex scenes, you know.
I know. That's so...
but it's weird when I'm watching a movie going, it really didn't need that sex scene. Because that, if you just cut out that 1 minute or 5 seconds or whatever it is, you know, because the entire scene, and I'm thinking of a certain movie, I can't remember, that, you know, that little slip, that little 2 seconds, if it wasn't in the thing, you could show it to your mom. But now you can't because there's that one little, you know. So I'm conscious of that too. But I don't think little old ladies are reading Love and Rockets. See, that's the thing. I don't think about that. I think it's people who outgrew comics, superhero comics, for adolescents, and now they want to read more. That was part of my goal to do the stories I do and the way I do.
Do you feel you have a clear sense of who your audience is? I mean, do you feel like you know?
No, just intelligent, you know, spectacular, wonderful people. That's all.
You're pandering, Gilbert. You're pandering.
Well, no, I just hope, I believe that the readership of Love and Rockets from the beginning until now are intelligent readers. Yeah. You know, that really they get it. That's why sometimes I put in stuff that like they wouldn't get in a mainstream comic maybe, but they get it because they're grown-ups and they're looking at what the story's about or whatever. That's how I feel about it. I don't know. I'm not out there, you know, but I'm trusting things are going well.
If I see if someone is reading Love and Rockets, I have a good sense that they're going to be a cool person. I will say that, and smarter than the average bear. So this I mean this page also is a good example of bringing in the magical realism of Palomar. Like Palomar, I find really fascinating in that it's, you know, this kind of anonymous Central American village. You never say exactly where it is. There are elements that kind of realism elements that kind of interrupt the life there, like, you know, leftist guerrillas or, you know, political squads or whatever, but you never name them. They're never exact in some way. And then there's also these incredibly, you know, bizarre magical elements that come in. So some of the statuary, and at times it kind of reminds me of Crazy Cat's Coconut County, like this kind of wild. So how do you think about that balancing act of creating a sense of gritty realism and more surreal fantasy?
I wanted to put my childhood and my adolescence and my imagination into, you know, Palomar, you know, when I started developing it and this and that. But I didn't want to be a specific place because I don't like to be straitjacketed with reality. Okay. This country doesn't do that. Colombia doesn't do what Puerto Rico does. You know, Dominican Republic doesn't do what Mexico does, but the people are the same. You know what I mean? The details are different, but the people are the same. So I wanted to make that place, the people where all the people fit, but it's nowhere and it's everywhere. You know, just Dogpatch, you know, a Little Abner's World, you know, even though that was a satire or whatever. I just wanted a place where I could put as much of what I believe people are, including myself, and, you know, what people go through and this and that, but and give it some gravity, give it some weight to where it could be happening in some place, let's say, but then making it up, it didn't have to stick with, well, you know, in Mexico they do this and this and that. So I just made up stuff that was like it, like eating slugs. That is disgusting. That is the most disgusting thing I've created. But I thought, no, that just makes them different. They're from a different world, you know, yet you relate to them. You know, that's what that was about, creating nutty things like that were like, are you kidding? What are they doing that for? But you still relate to them as characters. That was my job, you know, to make that happen.
Yeah, yeah. The fried babosas, the fried slugs, are one of my favorite details.
They're disgusting.
um, this is also from Human Diastrophism. This is from Human Diastrophism, and it's an interesting moment in the story because, which is, you know, fairly compressed, and this is a more decompressed page, but it's kind of going into, I think, the memories of the serial killer here.
Serial killer, yeah, it's a serial killer's mind.
And you're giving, I think it's an example of that you even these characters that there's so many different characters going on, but you always have a moment where you kind of get more of their backstory in some way. And talk to me about this page.
That character needed this page, you know, really, because he was just a serial killer, and I was doing the mysterious serial killer that we learned about later, because, you know, what we learned in movies and stuff was pretty dramatic, and then you find out really that there's a difference between sociopath is learned, psychopath is born. So this guy's a psychopath. So it doesn't show anything wrong with his childhood. That's what this page is also. Nothing went wrong with him. He was already there, you know. So and the thing, okay, this is from the reprint because it has his name, Tommaso. You see his name? That wasn't in the comic. I was so, like I said, I get so into what I'm doing, I forget to reference where they are, what they're doing, why is it there, you know, and the readers come up with their own answers, you know, which is okay with me though, because that's how I read comics as a kid. You know, I'm not saying that the readers of Little Rockets are kids, but when I was a kid growing up, I didn't always read the comic because it was boring. Stan Lee wrote too many words, you know, or EC comics. I loved them, looking at them and what happens in them, but I go, I'm not going to read all these captions. I'm not going to read this stuff. It's not that good. You know, I'll do that in a book, you know, because, you know, you're concerned with all the writing you do, the paragraphs you do are written just right to, you know, get you in there. Whereas comics doesn't always need that, or at least not so much of it, just enough. So when I started reading EC comics, I go, I'm going to stop reading the captions. I'm going to just, you know, and then like
sometimes the captions were explaining what that was already in the visuals.
Already in there. It's just that the writers were pretty good and they just gave a good description. But so did the art, you know, and the art's nicer. So anyway, that's what happened to me, is I just stopped reading those and just read important information. It was only in the words, but. So anyway, I got carried away with that, and I wouldn't reference why this page is there, you know. So.
It does, like, I mean, you don't use a lot of captions in general. It's mostly word, you know, mostly dialogue for your scripting. And sometimes the page, a panel can be full of dialogue, but it always feels like for me, it's at least snappy, and it like kind of draws me in. It engages me. It's not this sort of like. Kind of effect that you get from these older comics oftentimes, where it just kind of like deadens the work.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, well, I guess my ultimate goal is to make comics as easy to read as Nancy. Now, Nancy comics, people know who Nancy is now because she keeps coming back in different versions. But the whole thing about Nancy, and this is a quote from Wally Wood, the great EC artist, or paraphrase, I'm sorry. He says, by the time, you know, you open up the newspaper and you don't want to read Nancy, you've already read it. Now that's immediacy. Spiegelman has a similar quote, something like, you can't not read Nancy. If Nancy's in front of you, you have to read it. It's just so immediate. And I think that's why people still love it and the jokes are funny. I like the gags, but that's kind of like the immediacy. That's why my art's a lot simpler. The dialogue's simpler. Everything is just right there. You know, I do miss drawing like this though. Now that I look at this, I go, I miss the brush, but I'm drawing too small now. And I hate to say it, being older now, I don't have as control of the brush as I once did, unless I'm drawing very large strokes. But the detail, those little tiny details, I don't know how I did those. It was with this one little brush, you know?
Oh wait, that was all brush? None of that's pen?
Barely. No, this is mostly brush, almost all. Yeah, wow. The little lines, okay, like the little lines on his forehead, and then in the background, and the shadows in the back, that's a pen, you know. Right.
Okay. So now you're using mostly pen. Do you use a brush pen at all,
or? Just to fill in blacks. I rarely use a brush at all, any kind of brush, except for filling in blacks and doing the choppy look of the trees. You know, you want it to give leaves a choppy look. This is all brush, except for
the Julio's Day has these incredible moments of real painterly sort of moments and very decompressed. And there's very few words in this whole book. So it's feels completely different from that kind of like chock full sort of feeling of something like Poison River or yeah. So
I was happy to do this style because I go back and think like, well, I got to start putting all them words again, like human dastrophism or Poison River. And I go, no, I've done those. I don't have to do it again. I can tell the story differently. I can let it breathe. And basically, it's about letting it breathe and just looking at the art. And,
right. And the story.
Because look, if you show somebody a comic book that has all these words all just crammed all over and a little bit of art, and then you see a page like this, not by me, but anybody, they'll look at this page because they can put themselves in it. It's breathing.
Yeah.
Easier to, at least an immediate response. A lot of people like the dense writing. A lot of people do. But when you first look at it, that's a thing for me, is what is the first impression, when you look at a page.
Well, it's great to be able to have both, right? To have both in your wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
This is a page. It's original art from Birdland, and again, kind of just showing this sort of like, are you covering your own eyes from your own art?
I wasn't expecting it. That's all.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Well, maybe. Okay. I think this is a wonderful moment here that you're able to create such a kind of joyous vision of sexuality that is really, wonderful.
I can't believe how a page like this takes 3 days to do at least. And I took 3 days posing them, It's funny.
So, all right. So how long it takes you 3 days to do a page?
Like if I'm trying to get something out, usually sometimes take longer, but only because I'm lazy, only because I take my time now. But
lazy?
Like, I wanted to get this out. So you can't do a page like this in one day. Or if you do, like just say you did, you can't do it again, at least for another several days or weeks even, because you just put yourself so much into something and you're like, okay, I ain't doing that again. So now I spread myself. I can't believe it.
All right, I'll move along. This is from Fatima, and so this is a zombie thing. You've clearly you're moving more to pen at this point, right?
Yeah. I did this story because I owed this story sort of. It was kind of like I wanted to do a female action character. And in the early days when Love and Rockets, we had action characters, especially my brother. He would have people doing adventure stories, and would always ask, are you ever going to do an adventure story with a woman character and this and that? And I go, yeah, I'll get to it. And then years later, when this came up, I thought, I can do it now. And I go, but where am I going to set it? Where am I going to put this woman with guns and running around? I go, I don't want to do superheroes. Or I thought, well, what's popular these days? Oh, the kids love zombies. So. And it's okay to shoot zombies. There's no support group for zombies, so you can. Because remember, there was that period where you couldn't kill anybody, and then so they brought back zombies and aliens in movies. If you'll notice, there was a period where, and now you can slave owners and Nazis you can kill, which is I'm okay with.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so we want to get to some questions here as well. So I'm going to actually end the slideshow now. Let's see here. How do we do this? Okay. And the share. Oops. Okay. How do I do that? I'm sorry. It's my normal. Oops. That's not it. Okay.
I can't help you.
Yeah, clearly. Right. Okay. This is. Okay, there we go. So we got some questions from the audience, and all right. So, who is Gilbert's favorite editor on Earth? It's a trick question.
It's not a trick question because I know there's only one person who would ask that question. Actually, she is Shelley Bond. Is my favorite editor. Actually, I've worked with several, and most of the time it was a good experience. Pretty good. But Shelley, we just have a connection. We just kind of gel in a certain way. So Shelley's been great, and
She also has a follow-up question, which is who wins in a fight, Luba or David Lapham?
David Lapham's on the ground, man. He's on the ground with his nose busted. Luba, Jesus. Well, she's got the hammer. But
I'm in the hammer, like, yeah. I think it's stops that that debate. Okay, so I've also got a question from Marwan saying, how do you approach cover design? And I should have had an example of your covers here because they are in color and they're designed.
Design is I just try to path of least resistance. Actually, I just thought of the thing of, you know, when I started reading fanzines as a kid, and editors and artists and writers would talk about stuff that I never thought about as a kid, right? Like, oh, well, who was it? I can't remember what editor it was from DC, I guess. It goes, you have a red cover always sells. You have a dinosaur on the cover, dinosaur. And then this editor went a little crazy, goes, a superhero with his head growing giant. That's a good cover. And sure enough, those are the covers I looked at as a kid. Why is the Flash's head growing giant? Anyway, so apparently a red cover is good, dinosaur on the cover is good. It's sort of a joke now, but I don't know. I still think in those terms. So what I think of it about, like, oh, I see what they're saying. They're saying, make your cover stand out amongst all the others. So that's how I think. I mean, it sounds goofy, but that's how I think of it. I want simple covers that stand out with color, using the color, doing the work, so it will stand out in the store. Like, oh, I got to find the new Love and Rockets. There it is, because the cover is just there. You know, it's really that. That's where it started. Now it's become natural, just to make it as simple and friendly.
So how do you approach color in general? I mean, like, most of your work is black and white. So do you, when you are working in color, the occasional color special, or you know, doing one of these covers, like, do you enjoy color, or is it?
It's become a chore because I've run out of colors. You know, and how many red covers can you do? How many, you know, how many blue skies can you do? You either do pink or pink skies, blue skies, or yellow skies. You know, because any other color looks weird for a sky. Maybe purple, maybe. But
yellow doesn't look weird for a sky.
No, it's because it shows that it's very hot. And see, you'll have a white sun. If you'll notice, with a yellow sky, you'll see the sun it's white, and so it gives you that Palomar look. I guess that's what. But colors, it's just I'm not a colorist. You know, I always leave it up to the production folks, and I prefer primary colors because it just grabs your eye. You know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we've got another question here, a traditional comic student question, which is, what is your advice to a cartoonist working on their first book?
First
book. Can you even remember back that far?
You know what? I would just go with the clarity thing. Don't get too ambitious with putting so many words and so much density of the backgrounds or the drawings itself. This is the first book now. I'm not saying don't go there, or the book can actually eventually end up there. But I would say clarity at first, because we want to just get into the story and start reading it and following it. Clarity. I don't want to say simple drawings, because the artist might be detail crazy, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But clarity first of all. Get us into your story simply, and you know, you don't have to explain the plot in in 5 panels or whatever. You just get the characters moving, or the visual setup. You know, clarity first. That's my advice.
That makes sense. Is there an end to Love and Rockets? Not the comic, but the world, or does it just go on when you aren't drawing it? It's interesting.
Well, it's, when I finish it, it'll probably keep going on. Like Palomar will continue and I won't.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. The only thing that's going to stop me from doing comics is either my health fails, my mind fails, or the publisher says we can't lose money anymore. Those 3 things. And I don't know which one's going to come first.
Would you ever have other people do Palomar stories? Would you ever kind of allow that?
I might in a moment of madness, I might do it as a special. It wouldn't be a constant thing, but people tackling it, in a collection or something like that, just for fun now. Because at this point, you can't ruin it anymore. You can't do anything. It's already almost 40 years of it. So yeah, so it would just be for fun, really. Now, and a little ego.
Fascinating to see. I would imagine other people, doing your characters in some way. Yeah.
Trouble is, the masters are all dead. So I would love to see Steve Ditko do a Palomar story, or you know, in his prime, but that was in the 60s and 70s. So, you know,
Yeah.
a Jack Kirby Luba story, you know, just that would be fun, but there's no such thing, you know.
Yeah, it was interesting looking back at your work, and the really early pages reminded me so much of Ditko. I mean, really.
Oh yeah, super fan of the early Marvel stuff because you know I grew up in the '60s. So Jack Kirby was the big balloon monsters, the big swelling, slow motion, hands coming out of the water, and a little rowboats falling over. And the guys are falling. You know, his detail is perfect. His eye. And then Ditko is like slinky and gothy, you know, like kind of like everybody's creepy looking, and you know, and there's old people who are being abused by their you know, their landlords and this and that. And I just love the way he drew, and I love the way he drew old people.
Yeah.
Like Aunt May now is what 12 in the movies, you know. She was like, you know, 75 in the comic, you know, and she was a frail little old lady, and I related to that because I knew little old ladies, you know, growing up. I knew, you know, somebody's grandma or something. They're little old ladies with a bun, and they could barely move it through the house, but they can't wait to, you know, serve you dinner or something like that or whatever, some nice thing, you know. And that was really important to me to see that in a comic book. And Ditko really went for that. There's a beautiful panel where Spider-Man's sneaking around the house, and he looks inside to see where Aunt May is, and he knows that she's in the attic, and she's looking at a photograph of her husband who died in the first Spider-Man story, who was killed by the burglar, and she's it's a, you know, a little cornball scene where she's got a little handkerchief and he's wiping her eye like that, and Spider-Man's looking, and he's super bummed because he caused murder by, you know, inadvertently, and so he's just super bummed. And I thought those are really good moments that Ditko brought that were just so homey, just so you know, lived in, you know. So I admired him for that.
I hadn't thought about how revolutionary that really was, especially in a superhero comic, to have a prominent older character and like who had emotional depth to her, and I absolutely see that in your work. So that's
that's definitely influence of that. The early Ditko stories, and that was he did Amazing Adult Fantasy, and then he did the monster stories, and then he's Spider-Man. But that was always in it. He still had that in him.
Yeah,
you know, he was a very old school. I mean, look at the baggy pants he drew. It's like the '60s, and they were still wearing pants from the '40s. You know,
yeah.
But I didn't care. I just love the art. You know.
All right, so we've also got one from a question from Maxie saying, "Who is your favorite character from your work?" That's a big one.
Favorite.
I mean,
well, when it's all over, Luba will probably be my best character, if there's such a thing. You know, probably Luba, because but there's other parts of my personality. Like I really liked Venus as a kid. Right. I like Venus. I like Luba. Favorite though, it would be I don't know. It's hard because they're all me split into, you know, 50 people, you know. So it's, but Venus and Luba come to mind. I think they're the most ones I did the best. I did well with those characters. I'm not disappointed in what I did with them.
Yeah, no. Okay, here's from Gaia. When you're inventing a character, do you get a mental image of them first, or do you let your sketching kind of guide the character design?
Sometimes I just look at all my characters. I go, I want a new character, but I got to make them look different. So I'll just try to play against the characters that are already there, and that's how that happens. It's like, okay, like Birdland, and sometimes I just go with mistakes, and that happens with filmmaking and everything. I did the cover for Birdland, and that was supposed to be the character Fritz, which I was introducing her in there. I'd had her before, but she hadn't really done anything. So I put her in Birdland. I thought, I'll use an old character that I'd made up. So I put her on the cover, and I go, doesn't look like her. Doesn't look like her, but I don't want to white out her hair or change it. So, okay, she'll have a sister. Literally, that's how it happened. She has a sister. And now when I write the stories, and I'm writing the sisters now in Love and Rockets, it works. So you let yourself make these mistakes on purpose in a way, you know? So when I see a mistake like that, like, you know, it was meant to be, you know. I just did that recently too. I did another character who was on a cover or in a story. I go, this doesn't look like him. So I just changed, you know, a little bit of their hair or something, you know, and it's a different character, you know.
Well, it's also amazing, like just it brings to mind how like remarkable that the fact that your character designs in general, as we've talked about, but you have all these different kinds of body types, and they all like have kind of real world implications on their personalities, their characters. Like, you know, the sisters all have really large breasts, but they all kind of relate to that differently. Luba kind of can delight in it. Fritz does, but then Petra has breast reduction surgery, right? So like everybody's, and you have all these different kinds of bodies and all these different sorts of relationships to those bodies. It's really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. A lot of that is just simply like I'm just fighting with the norm. Like, well, you don't make up a character or especially a sympathetic character. And even the really super curvy girls with the boobs, it's like, no, they're characters in the story. I mean, however we see them, at a first glance, it's always been like they're all people in whatever in that context, So that's why I never shied away from drawing like that. It's like, well, no, they're people. If you saw somebody sitting next to you that looked like that, you might go, oops, whoa, what's that? And then, but it's a person, so that's the way I see it. Yeah. All the different looks and the way that characters are.
I think it's just it's a deeper level of creating character than most storytellers go. So Any other final thoughts you want to say? I think I've tortured you enough here with lots of questions.
No, just that keep reading my comics. No, I'm going to be making comics for a while now. I'm 63. I should make it to 70 maybe. We'll see. I don't know.
Please make it farther than that and keep on making comics.
I'm going to try.
All of your work, and we're all inspired by it. So
I'll try. I'm going to have a good time where the last year is like people just reviewing it, shaking their heads like, oh, this used to be good. That's what I'm going to be. I've made it.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for the interview, and Gilbert, thank you so much for joining us and our students and the public that was able to tune in tonight. It's such an honor to have you here, and we're going to be able to read lots more of your comics for many years to come.
I hope so.
So from here, we have a couple more weeks in our summer session, and we're back right here 2 weeks from tonight with Christina Steens Stewart to talk about their work in editing and drawing daily newspaper strips and drawing graphic novels and all the above. But Gilbert, congratulations on your work. It was a pleasure for you to be here. Justin, do you want to say any final words before we go?
Again, just an honor, a privilege, and it's always like a wonderful thing to be able to actually communicate with one of the people that's been such an inspiration for me. Thank you for everything you've done, and
Well, thank you guys for thinking about an old man who's just in his little house, just making comics and by candlelight, and a powdered wig,
Yeah, good. Hopefully, like manacled to your drawing table, so you can never leave. Right? Okay.
Yep. All right. With that, thank you.
Okay,
good night from California College of the Arts, and we'll see everybody soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.